Welcome, and today we talk on public policy. What is public policy, and how does this work within the United States? Now, public policy is anything that government formulates, the rules, the laws, right? It can be defined as the purpose or the goal of government that is backed usually by a sanction, a reward or punishment, right? And there's, as we said, orders, rules, and regulations. All of this is public policy, right? Now, we need public policy because, as for example, one of the reasons we joined a civic reality are public goods, building roads, public universities and colleges, amongst many things, right? Security, police, army, military, all these things. So we need this because it helps us enjoy the quality of life that we wanted to enjoy under government. Now, how is public policy made? There are a couple of steps that we'll talk about in how public policy is made. Number one, a problem is identified. Right, so we start by identifying a particular problem. Is it environmental? Is it an environmental problem? Is it a financial tax problem? What is the problem that we need to address? Number two, we set an agenda. Right, we look at different action steps that we need to take. So there's discourse, this process. We mobilize supporters behind the issue area, and so that's the next step. Then we formulate a policy. Right? We formulate a policy. For example, we do a cost-benefit analysis. What are the costs of this policy and what are the benefits? And we want to get to a utility maximization where the benefits outweigh the costs. All right? And we use the rational choice. This is part of rational choice where man is rational, so we can do these calculations. And so we want the best step of policy, hopefully, is where the benefits will outweigh the costs. And then the next step is adoption, right? We actually take those action goals, right? And we want an outcome where in negotiation, no better outcome could come out. The Pareto optimal outcome, right? Now, because there are going to be other voices or positions who will come, and they will also want to have a little bit of discussion on the legitimization of this policy. So there are different compromises between different stakeholders as we begin to adopt this policy. And so we continuously refine it because we are part of a democratic republic, and therefore different groups will come together. And of course, we've talked about how laws are made in the United States, and so compromise is part of the game. Then the policy after adoption is implemented, right? The policy is actualized. And the policy can be actualized, for example, in America, from the federal government, implemented by the state government to the county government, right? So you're talking about things like health, right? We have the federal government, which is collecting a lot of money that has matters that deal with health. But in order to implement health policy in an easier form, they work alongside with state governments, right? And those state governments implement at the local level using county governments, right? And so all this is part of the implementation process. And then finally, we review, we evaluate, and analyze whether these policies give us the outcomes that we wanted, right? So these are multiple step approach in how public policy works and how we implement and verify policies. All right, now, when it comes to public policy and the creation of of these policies, is to understand that there are many interests, right? There are many interests, and interest is something that is shared amongst a faction of people, and they understand that this interest will be affected by government laws, rules, ordinances, right? So they come together, right? Whether for religious, ethnic, economic reasons, and they want to influence the outcome or the creation of these policies, okay? And this enters our interest groups. So who are different interests? Well, we have the parties. We talked about parties lead to the creation of government. Parties have their interests in ideology and in the policies. The different branches of government have their own interest, right? Government has its interest. The experts, the federal bureaucracy also have their interests. The people, right? We the people, the voters, have our interests. And finally, major organized groups have their interests. And so they have multiple people who have interests in decision making in a nation. All right. A few examples, we can look at those interest group triangles. So for example, we have, let me draw this a better way. We have Congress, for example. We have the executive branch, and in it we have the Department of Defense. And we have interest groups, right, who are the manufacturers of weapons, right? And so each interest sometimes looks like this. Congress passes a budget and makes rules and laws. They send the money to the Department of Defense on spending, right? So there's a whole bunch of money to maybe make helicopters, warplanes, amongst many other things. And then there are those who manufacture, who are looking to get those contracts, which may be usually in the billions or hundreds of millions. And in turn, these interest groups and manufacturers give money to congressmen's war chests. And what are war chests? Those are their campaigns. They give money to their campaign funds, right? Or in some cases, they run their own parallel campaigns, or they give money to things called super PACs and PACs to run, to help popularize a particular party or particular candidate, right? So all of this is part of the public policy making process, right? And a few examples, we can say, for example, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, 300,000 members, over 100 and probably right now over $200 million. The NAACP, 300,000 members, over 28 million. NRA, only 5 million members, but at this point, almost $500 million and counting. So you have different interests. They're organized. They have millions of members or thousands of members, and they have a lot of money to spend on candidates running for office and for super PACs. So in America, there are those who argue in a day of hard and soft money, which we'll talk about, that we have gone to a post-democracy. We are in a corporate democracy where companies and interest group money is influencing and socializing and determining who will be the next president of the United States. Some figures have, for example, somebody like Elon Musk, who's argued to have used over 200 million, right? That's almost $250 million in the last presidential election, right? So a lot of money is playing part. Now you have hard money and soft money. Hard money is directly controlled by the Federal Elections Commission. They control how much money you can give to a candidate directly, roughly $5,000 a candidate per election, right? And what you can say, and so there's greater control on hard money given directly to candidates, right? And that is not really controversial in any way. Now, originally, Congress had passed laws in which they determined they didn't think it was a good idea for a lot of money to play part in American elections. However, a couple of cases came to the Supreme Court. One of them was SpeechNow.org versus federal election. The commission wanted to stop how much money was being used in elections, where they argued that this particular PAC, Political Action Committee, let me explain what that is. A PAC is that interest that is organized with the purpose of influencing election either by giving money directly to candidates or running their own independent election. Now, this particular PAC said that they were running independent. They were running independent of any candidate. Therefore, they should not be limited on how much they use. And the courts agreed. They said that because they're running independent, they're not working directly with any candidate, right? That they have First Amendment rights of speech, and therefore they have the right also of expenditure to use as more money. Another case was Citizens United versus the FEC in 2010, where the argument of freedom of speech. Again, the argument is how much should they influence elections, especially close to elections. In this case, the Supreme Court again argued that these corporations have, or these PACs have the right of freedom of speech, and therefore they can make videos, they can make different materials to influence us as the citizens. And as long as they're independent, they're not working alongside any candidate, they can also use as much money as needed. And these are now called super PACs, right? They can raise unlimited sums of money from corporations, unions, and associations and individuals and advocate for or against candidates or issue areas, right? So that increases the amount of money, and as of 2021, they are already spending almost $3 billion, these super PACs. And so the American public policy and election process is now heavily influenced by a lot of money. Right, and one example was a member of Congress who said that they spent a significant amount of their time actually calling corporations to raise money to be reelected, rather than focusing on their job of making good law. So that is public policy in the United States. The fact that it is heavily influenced by hard money given directly to candidates, but it's really controlled by the FEC when they work directly with candidates. But there's also a new group of political action committees called super PACs, which are independent expenditure only organizations that work with no candidate, but they can use unlimited amounts of money. Maybe you've seen those commercials. Election commercials, and at the bottom it says sponsored by the XYZ, sponsored by the XY123. And so we will continue to see this influence American public policy. Remember, public policy is anything government formulates, the rules, the laws, and the norms. And these policies affect interest groups, all right? And so keep that in mind and when we talk about public policy.